Did you know that the United States once had a secret war plan to invade Canada? Not in the 1700s, not during the War of 1812, but in the 1920s and 1930s, at a time when the US and Canada were supposed to be peaceful neighbors. It sounds unbelievable, almost absurd, but it is completely real. Let's talk about War Plan Red. After World War I, the world felt unstable. Old empires had collapsed. New powers were rising. Military leaders everywhere were asking the same question: who could be the next enemy? In the United States, military planners began drafting contingency strategies for potential future wars. They created color-coded plans. Each color represented a different country. Japan was orange, Germany was black, Mexico was green, and the British Empire was red. Now here is where it gets interesting. At that time, Canada was still part of the British Empire, so if the United States ever went to war with Britain, Canada would automatically be involved. That meant the US needed a strategy. War Plan Red was developed primarily between 1927 and the early 1930s by the U.S. Army and Navy. It was not emotional. It was not fueled by hatred. It was cold, strategic planning. The plan outlined how the U.S. would invade Canada quickly, seize major cities like Toronto and Montreal, and cut off British reinforcements before they could arrive across the Atlantic. One of the key objectives was capturing Halifax, Nova Scotia. Why? Because Halifax was a major port that Britain could use to send troops and supplies. The logic was simple. If war with Britain ever broke out, the US would need to move fast. Take Canada first. Deny Britain a foothold in North America. If you enjoy discovering hidden parts of American history like this, leave a like so I can bring you more stories most people never hear about. Now, before this starts sounding dramatic, let's ground it. This was a contingency plan. Military planners create scenarios for all kinds of possibilities. It does not mean the US wanted to invade Canada. It meant they wanted to be prepared if relations with Britain ever collapsed. And at the time, that possibility was not considered impossible. Remember, the War of 1812 was not ancient history. Tensions between global powers were real. The British Empire was still dominant. The United States was growing in power and influence. Strategic rivalry was part of global politics. In fact, Canada had its own defensive plans in case of a U.S. invasion. One Canadian proposal, known as Defense Scheme No. 1, even suggested launching preemptive strikes into American territory to slow down U.S. forces. Yes, Canada had a plan to invade parts of the United States to comment which fact surprised you the most. Here is another twist. In 1935, the U.S. Congress actually approved funding related to War Plan Red. This included improving infrastructure near the Canadian border, such as airfields and transportation routes that could be useful in a conflict. It was not just theoretical paperwork sitting in a drawer. But then, history shifted. By the late 1930s, global threats changed dramatically. Nazi Germany rose in Europe. Imperial Japan expanded in Asia. The focus of American military planning moved away from Britain and toward more immediate dangers. When World War II began, the United States and Canada became close allies instead of potential enemies. They cooperated on continental defense through agreements like the Ogdensburg Agreement in 1940, which created joint military coordination between the two countries. The secret plan to invade Canada faded into irrelevance. So why does this matter? because it reveals something important about how nations think. Countries do not just plan for likely scenarios. They plan for unlikely ones too. Even friendly neighbors prepare for worst-case possibilities. And here is something powerful to reflect on. Today, the US and Canada share one of the longest undefended borders in the world. They are major trading partners, military allies, cultural neighbors deeply intertwined. The idea of invasion now feels almost unthinkable. But less than a century ago, both sides quietly prepared for it. That does not mean there was hatred. It means there was uncertainty. If you want to see more videos like this, make sure to subscribe so you do not miss the next one. Here is the takeaway. History is not just about wars that happened. It is also about wars that almost happened, plans that were drafted, strategies that were considered, paths that were never taken. War Plan Red reminds us that alliances are not automatic. They are built, maintained, strengthened over time. The peaceful US and Canada relationship we see today is not an accident of geography. It is the result of diplomacy, shared interests, and decades of cooperation. And maybe that is the most fascinating part of this story. The same nations that once quietly prepared to fight each other now stand side by side. Sometimes the greatest victories in history are the wars that never begin, and that is a story worth remembering.